when it comes to talking Mizzou after a weekend like they had at Texas A&M, you're not going all rah-rah and everything's fine. You're saying, hey, things need to be worked on. And look, Drinkwitz, again, I could not count the number of times he said, I take full responsibility. It starts with me, things like that. And look,
that's good.
Yeah, I mean, he has to say that because there was not one thing that you look at and say, you know what, it looked pretty good the other day against Texas A&M. No, not really. So that in and of itself falls on the head coach. And here was Eli Drinkwitz on his message to the team after a loss like that.
I had a very clear and direct message with our team, and I'm going to say it again here to y'all. One bad day doesn't define our team or our season. Our response will. There's going to be bad days. You're going to have, you're not always going to have peak performance as much as we would like to. It doesn't have to define us, but we do have to respond, and we do have to respond in a better manner. And how we respond will define who we are as a team and what kind of character we have as a program.
So that was Eli Drinkwitz, and again, he's right. Teams will stumble here and there. I think when you stumble the way that you did against Texas A&M this weekend, it's not just, okay, this week we'll get back on track. No, it is a continuing process. So there has to be further and further proof of, we actually are going to respond after what happened back on October 5th. We're going to keep that and make sure that we continue to respond to it each and every week, because that's ultimately what is going to have to be required here if you want to be anything special this year. So that's kind of where I see that.
Yeah, he said everything he was supposed to say today, but that's just like the prerequisite of the next stage in this thing. And hopefully his players buy in, man, because Drink is not going to be able to do it all by himself, but he's got to motivate and get them into the mind frame of kind of what the new task at hand is, because the task at hand had been, hey, go out, win a road game, find yourself maybe unbeaten going into Tuscaloosa a little later this month, and now you're starting to see stars in your eyes. You're starting to think about what you might need to be able to do to secure a playoff spot. And now you're so far outside the realm of that even being in the picture that you have to kind of break it down to square one and start doing the things that made you successful in the first place, that this team had going for them last year. Something to prove that you guys can execute in all phases, prove that you are among the top teams in the SEC. And when you go against like competition, which I considered A&M to be coming into the week, I guess the rest of the year will tell the tale on whether that is the case and Mizzou just had one bad day, or whether they're just not the team that we thought they were. But like, they have the opportunity now to write that story.
875-KTGR, if you want to call or text us. What was nice to hear was that Eli Drinkwitz said that with how they lost, it wasn't necessarily the players giving up, right? It wasn't for lack of effort. Here was Eli Drinkwitz on that.
I didn't see anything on the film that told me we had a lack of effort, and I'm keenly aware to look for that because that would tell me that there's a deeper issue. We did not respond in either side of the ball with making the plays that we needed to, which again goes back to, did we put those guys in the right situations on offense or defense, which is my responsibility. And we just weren't able to land that counter punch. I thought we did, obviously, but it got taken off the board. And again, we have to respond in a better manner. I think we all see that, recognize that, take responsibility for that.
That's the main thing, because I agree from what I saw. It wasn't like Mizzou wasn't trying. It just seemed they were out of sorts. And we're expecting one play when a completely different approach from A&M was coming to them. And they just they didn't know what to do. They were completely lost.
I think also they got popped in the mouth by a few things not going in their direction, not just like schematically with Connor Wegman over Marcel Reed, which I'm curious, did he really go very deep into that aspect of it at all, Andy? Because that was one thing that I did look at and say, he really acted as though he had it all figured out coming into the week. And that may just fall under the category of it's on me, it's on coaching, because it didn't seem they were prepared for the switch up that happened right before the game with the different quarterback. But that was one of the aspects of it that I was kind of wondering about.
Gabe DeArmond did ask him something along those lines, and here was Eli Drinkwitz's response.
Yeah, I'll refer back. I think we all take responsibility for the issues on Saturday. Schematically and execution-wise, at the end of the day, it falls on my shoulders to make sure it's better, and our focus is leading up to UMass. We make no excuses about it. Shouldn't have mattered who was playing the quarterback position. We should have been better, and we need to focus this week on stopping this quarterback and figuring out our scheme so that we can execute at a higher level.
That was the response from.
I think that's
matter. Yeah.
Well, I think that's fine. It shouldn't have mattered because you played so bad. It's not like Connor Wegman is playing a different sport. He's still playing the quarterback position. But that does tell me that they were surprised. It wasn't mind games. I think they were genuinely surprised to see Connor Wegman come out.
Probably.
And maybe not just Eli Drinkwitz. And he's not going to throw Corey Batoon under the bus. But, I mean, that's his scheme. That's his game plan. But again, Drink was the one that was asked about it earlier last week, and he basically, made it seem as though it was a silly question to even ask. And that's the part where it's like, and to his credit, he said that's on me. He didn't get into specifics because why would you fall on the sword any more than you have to? But he said it. Again, I'm going to refer back to a previous answer. It's on me. It's on coaching. We've got to be better. Shouldn't have mattered which quarterback, but also, that one does kind of feel like they whiffed on that. And I don't know that they would have won had they known the answer to the starting quarterback question coming in, Andy.
Either way, I don't know if you want to admit what you actually were thinking going in, because
of course
either you prepared for the wrong quarterback or you did prepare for that quarterback and you were completely
bad.
Carved up. So
I'm going to lean, again, if he says it wasn't an effort issue, I'm going to lean into, I think they got surprised. I think it was on the coaching staff that they didn't have necessarily the game plan that they needed. And they came in pretty confident and cocky in what their game plan was going to be against one guy, and then that guy didn't end up playing. So I don't know how much of that caused the result, but I kind of refuse to believe it wasn't at least a part of it. But again, they're saying all the right things and trying to bounce back from that. You can't change it. Once it's happened, it's happened. You can't go back in time and you would like to think it'll never happen again. You got to be diligent and be prepared for anything that could possibly be thrown your way, starting with UMass and going through the rest of the season. But yeah, that is one that kind of does jump out at me, and you look at and go, all right.
A little bit. 875-KTGR if you want to call or text us with your thoughts on Mizzou football as they head into a new week and try to shake off that loss to Texas A&M. Old Jay is here on the KTGR hotline now. Old Jay, what you got?
Okay, first off, Blues are not making the playoffs. They're not going to be very good.
Yeah, he's right.
Armstrong did nothing. Armstrong never does anything. They won the cup in spite of him because Bennington decided to become hot, and they had the right mix of players and the right coach. As far as Mizzou, does A&M not put out? Did A&M not put out a depth chart or an injury report or anything like that?
Again, Connor Wegman was questionable all week.
Listed as questionable, listed as an or, I think, on the starter. I think they were both listed first string, but because he hadn't played, they just kind of figured it was lazy if that was the way they did it. It was unconscionable, but it seems like that's what happened.
So, admittedly, I was busy during the game. What I did see was a team that gave up, and here's what I'm going to say. 6-6 is on the table if that's what they're going to look like the rest of the season.
Sure.
That's horrible to say after thinking 10-2. With that kind of effort and that kind of mentality, 6-6 is staring them right in the face. 5-7, maybe. I think they beat. I think Mississippi State's still a for sure win because they're terrible. But I asked Gabe DeArmond on his podcast what was more likely, 10-2 or 6-6, and he said if Mizzou loses to Auburn, 6-6 is very much on the table, and that just makes me sad. But here's the thing. I think they'll look better. Honestly, there was a spread 28 right now at UMass.
Yeah, something like that.
Mizzou needs to double it. Wow. Mizzou needs to come out and put NCAA, Xbox, PlayStation type numbers and just absolutely destroy UMass in every sense of the word. Shut them out, put 60 on the board, and maybe Mizzou fans will be like, okay, but that's about the only thing that's going to come out. The only bad thing is if it's a close game oh my gosh, you're going to see panic, but it's not going to be close. I'm telling you right now, it's going to be close. Mizzou's got to come out big.
That's got to be the hope, and appreciate the call here, Old J, on the big show. That would be.
I actually don't disagree with him one bit.
Double the score is 56-0.
Yeah, other teams do this. Ole Miss can put 60 on somebody, and then Ole Miss can also turn around and lose a game to somebody they're not supposed to lose to. Tennessee could turn around and lose to Arkansas. Like, these things happen for sure, but if you're going to be in the class with those teams, this is the easiest game you're going to have the rest of the way. If you go, and look, I said I'm going to probably tell you they're going to be tight at halftime because I am not presently a believer until I am shown that they are going to turn things around. Old J said it looks like, kind of tune into that game, it looks like they kind of gave up and gave in. Drinkwitz is saying he didn't see a lack of effort, and I don't think there was a lack of effort. I think they were shell-shocked. I think they had no idea what had just happened when they had some adversity early. A couple calls don't go their way. They do provide the answer, and Drink can't make excuses, but he did even feel it was necessary to bring up, I thought we did answer, 75-yard touchdown. And, Andy, if that happens, Mizzou very well could win that game. I know that's crazy to say based on everything that happened thereafter, but I believe they allowed their mentality to wilt. Their toughness was wilted. It did not stand up to the test of another piece of adversity. They could have handled the first two punches. That third one, that overturned touchdown was the punch they could not handle, and they thought, well, we did everything we were, and they kind of got a little bit entitled. They said, well, we did our job. We got back into it. We got our Luke Bauer touchdown pass to Marquise Johnson. That very similar, Andy, to how that Kentucky game started last year. They answered the bell in that game, and from there the game was over. They were the better team. They didn't get that answer. They thought they had it, and they allowed themselves to believe that they had it. I can tell you, we believed in the crowd that they had it. I turned around, I was high-fiving, I was saying some things I can't say on the radio. I said, we're here. We weathered the storm. Then I saw the yellow hanky. Mizzou saw the yellow hanky, and that was it, man. Their mentality was gone from that game. But while I'll agree with Drink that I don't think it was a lack of effort thereafter, it was lack of belief. It was a lack of will. It was a lack of, they just didn't have the gumption to be able to execute against a team that had buried them early.
Well, but again, that kind of seeps back into what the crowd does to you, because if you continue to have those rough moments and the crowd just gets more and more amped up as a result, you feel more pressure to try and quiet them. And then you press here and there. You feel like it's all on your shoulders. You have to try and find ways to make the next play while also, and this is especially on defense, because when you have an assignment and you have a gap to have to be accounting for, and you're the one that's like, oh, I feel like I need to make a play though. I want to stop this guy.
Antsy.
And then you get out of position, or things happen here schematically, and you're unable to recover. It's so hard to do in the moment, but when you start digging that hole and the crowd gets more and more on your shoulders, then you get that result, and you're just unable to. The weight just keeps getting heavier and heavier on you
until the game's over, which it was before halftime. And the punt that went out at the 6-inch line was like the last, where you're like, okay,
of course it happened that way.
All I could do was laugh, and then you think maybe halftime they'll go in and they'll come out with something to prove, and they allow a 70-yard touchdown on the first play. Like, the game is just over. So I would agree with that. I don't think it was a lack of effort, a lack of wanting to do well. I think it was not even necessarily, it was not discipline as much as it's hard to describe. Schematically, they might have been trying to do the same thing, but maybe it was their lack of discipline because they're feeling the weight of everything going on. They weren't disciplined maybe quite to be able to execute the very specific goals that they had on every given play. And when you lose a play, it starts to stack up on you, which would bring me back to maybe not the best idea in the world on your first road game, where we really don't know. As much as outside narrative maybe painted Mizzou in a pretty negative light to say, hey, they're fraudulent before they showed that they were, I think you can't know that you're going to go in and absolutely dominate the noise-filled environment. So maybe let's not have that become a talking point during the week, that we're so good we don't have to worry about the noise that's actually louder at practice. Again, it was innocuous, but also it wasn't. We saw that it wasn't. Yeah. The results are all that matters. So whether intent was there or not, those are things that I hope that it'll never happen again. I'm pretty confident that it'll never happen again.
875 KTGR if you want to call or text us here on the show. Steve is here on the KTGR hotline. Steve, what you got?
Hey, how are you? Good. I just wanted to comment. I know we beat it to death yesterday about how bad Missouri played, and they did play bad. But I just wanted to say that SEC officiating crew was also an embarrassment to the conference. When have you ever seen a ref get a two-handed shove to the chest and not throw a flag?
Yeah. Never until Saturday.
Yeah, and, that's two top 25 teams playing, and that's the officiating crew you send in for that? And really, who knows if he catches a pass or gets pass interference, what happens. But we played terrible after that, so it doesn't matter. But I was just thinking that those officials really were an embarrassment to the conference.
Yeah, and look, I appreciate the call, Steve, here on the Big Show. It's still something that you should call out, right? Because even then, like the Mizzou fans will say it was bad officiating, and then everyone will point, well, you lost by 31. This is how officiating at the highest level gets let off the hook. Because the only people that are allowed to complain are the folks whose team lost small. Like if you win small, you're not allowed to complain. If you win big, you're not allowed to complain. If you lose big, you're not allowed to complain. It's only the people who have a legitimate gripe to say this call could have swung the outcome of the game, and that's the only time that we can call it out. But when it comes to officiating at the highest level, I'm talking about high college football and NFL or MLB, whatever sport we're talking about, the pro level, we should hold them to the highest standard, and we let them off the hook when only a small section of the fan base at any given time gets to complain about officiating.
Well, it's hard, though, because there is never any accountability. It doesn't matter what sport, what league. High major college football, SEC, ACC, clearly no accountability there. NFL, MLB, there's never any accountability. Nothing that we can say out in the ether is going to change it. So it's kind of beating a dead horse from the moment you start talking about it. But you're right. Like, all we can do is talk about it and call it out when we see it. It's just so hard. Like, I thought there would be an opportunity to come in here yesterday after that weekend and say, referees cost Missouri this game. But no, I mean, you have to respond to it. You don't get to let the referees dictate the way you play for the next 3 quarters of the football game. And they did. They wilted. And maybe they learned that about themselves. Maybe they learned that they never want to put themselves into that position again. They never want to feel that way again. I will say, as much as they do have to take responsibility for their response to that adversity, I've never seen anything like it in my life. The way that those plays because again, you could go back to the PI that was called and then gets picked up on the subsequent drive. There was offsetting penalties where you could have made a case that it was just an offensive hold. They would have bumped back A&M further. Mizzou's getting the ball back. Then you have the 75-yard touchdown and the referee getting shoved by an A&M player in the middle of it. For none of those 4 things to go Missouri's way, which were various degrees of unacceptable refereeing, that sucks, man. But they had to find a way off the mat, and they couldn't get back up another time.
Yeah, when you go on the road especially, and the crowd is not on your side, and you keep making mistakes like that, and you dig the early hole, then you see how it can affect you, because Mizzou had the crowd on their side when they dug a 14-3 hole against College, or not Boston College, I should say, or when they dug an early hole against Vanderbilt. Like it was easier to come out of because you were not in an adverse environment. When you go into that place, which is as adverse as you can find, things are different. So you have to be ready for that too.
Yeah, and they weren't, and like you said, we don't really get a chance to find out what they're made of this weekend. So they can do the only thing that you can possibly do and win by 50. Like, I need to see this offense operate. Brady Cook played poorly. Offensive line played poorly. I want to see a tune-up, man, for Auburn, because you're not going to just beat Auburn by showing up to the stadium for homecoming. That's not the way you played against A&M. I know it'll be a home environment, so that'll be nice, but there's a lot that has to change. They have to stop assuming the sale on things. They have to stop assuming they're as good as they think they are and go start earning it each and every day. That's all there is to it. It'll be STP again because they got to prove it, I think, to the fan base a little bit more than it was the case previously. People were, even with the close wins over Boston College and Vandy, people were buying in to where they were at 4-0, but they didn't see anything close to resembling a competent team on Saturday.
Adam texting in 875-KTGR. The way the broadcast kept showing Brenden on the sidelines was a bad look. he appeared to have given up on his team. Not sure he did, but it sure looked that way. Eli Drinkwitz was asked about this today, and here was his response.
It's the first I've heard of it. Yeah. I'll be honest. I ignore the noise. There's nobody on our team that's questioning Luther's motivation, drive, determination to help us win. I think everybody saw him competing for catches at the end of the game. I think we were all disappointed. I hope they didn't have a video of me on the sideline the entire game, because my facial expressions would have shown disappointment in our performance. But again, I ignore the outside narrative and noise, focus in on our team and what the beliefs of our team are. We believe what we believe about each other because we see what we see every day in this environment. And we're all competitors. If we all wanted it to be different, it wasn't. We created that issue. So it's our job to respond this week.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, you're catching about a 10 to 15 second little shot of Luther Burden, and I guess he was kind of laying back and maybe under the shade a little bit. But again, I think Eli Drinkwitz would know if his team wasn't trying, and he didn't give any indication of that. And he has told us before that there were times where the effort wasn't there from maybe some players. And the fact that he didn't say it there, I tend to believe him on that.
Yeah, I will put up the BS meter a little bit. I'm not sure I believe that's the first time he heard of it, but I also think you're going to downplay it, even if you internally were like, I don't know, I would prefer Luther to not do that. The last thing you're going to do is throw him under the bus. So I don't disagree with his response to it, even if I don't buy every word of what Drink said. I think he responded to that question the right way, because you do. As a college coach, you got to have the buy-in from everybody. And I think Luther was frustrated. And at the game, I was standing there going, why isn't he in there on third downs? Where is he? Okay, he's kind of, yeah, the demeanor wasn't great. The body language wasn't great. But if the body language was great, I don't know what that would mean about how much he cares. You know what I mean? So, I'm not, while I don't necessarily believe Drink 100% that he didn't notice or didn't know before that question came out, I also think he responded to the question the right way. And I'm not freaking out about the demeanor, because you want people to be pissed off at a reaction to playing that way. So I'm not overly concerned about anything to do with that from Saturday's game.
And again, it's not to say that Burden probably wasn't the only player on the sidelines that, for a moment in time with the camera on them, looked a little bit down after being down 41-7 or whatever it ended up being. So again, once you get those plays on your side and you're able to execute a little bit better, then things look a little bit better on the sideline. So we'll see how it looks this weekend against UMass.